I was a teenage kid that invented an alternative to illegal drugs. The news broke that we had done $1 billion. I was visited by every 3-letter agency on the planet. The headline on the cover was the $350 million scam. So I was born in Iran in the mid 70s, and we moved from Iran to the United States during the Iranian Revolution. My parents, we were Iranian Jews, so fearing persecution, right? The generation before them were all Holocaust survivors. That whole period, just post World War II. So they were afraid it would happen again. So we skipped out of Iran, came to the United States via Europe, and came here to create a better life for ourselves, better lives for ourselves.
And was this when the Shah took
Right.
over?
This was
So
right at, well, no,
was
this
it
was the fall of the
just
Shah.
before?
Right.
Or after the Shah took over?
Right.
They
Right.
fled? Oh,
1979, the Shah of Iran fell, and a new regime came into Iran, and a lot of people left fearing the worst.
right. Okay. Sounds like a prudent decision. Um, okay. So how did that, how old were you?
I was like 4 or 5. Yeah, just a
Okay.
kid.
And when your parents came here, what did they do? Like, what did they do there in Iran?
So they worked for American companies. My mom worked for Lockheed as a secretary back when secretaries were a thing. And my dad was an accountant for Cooper's Libram, one of the biggest accounting firms. Like, very conservative, boring, jobs. He was a Jewish accountant. My mom was a secretary, and they had their whole lives mapped out. And then, holy shit, gotta fucking move, right? Because this might not end well for the Jews. So
Right.
historically, those things have not gone well for the Jews. So they're like, all right, we're going to bail. We're going to come to America. It's cool there anyway. Let's go. And literally in the cover of night, with whatever we could carry with us, ran to the plane, went through Germany, came to the United States, and they started hustling, right? So they started hustling, trying to figure out how are we going to make this work, right? My dad worked at pizza shops, at dry cleaners. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and this was all during the very beginning stages of Iran Contra. So Iranians were not the most popular people in the world, in this country in particular.
So, so his skill set you would think would transfer over and he'd be able to get a job as an accountant or a bookkeeper or something.
My dad's a mystery, man. I have no idea. But also, they weren't looking for, back then it wasn't all about like diversity and inclusion. It was like, we don't want that, that guy in our company. So the choices were fairly limited, but I think also they saw a bigger upside. I say this too, and I know with your background too, yeah, America is the most insane place on earth for opportunity. And people don't realize this until they've
Right.
traveled the world. Right. In England, right, like UK, Ireland, those places, people will scratch your car if you have a Rolls Royce. You got to park it inside somewhere just because you're rich. Like, it is not like you go to your buddies in those places in a lot of Europe. And I mean, they're coming to a little bit now, and you tell them, hey man, I got this insane idea. And they'll be like, fuck off. What? You think you're better than us? Like, go get a fucking job. But here, it's incredible opportunity. You tell people I got this insane idea. They're like, dude, where do we sign up?
It's funny. I had a buddy that was, actually uh, he was from London anyway. And this was when I was in prison and we were talking. He only got like a few months or
Yeah.
something stupid, which was still fraud, but it was, he liked that, like they were doing billing for like, I don't know, some large company, and they started adding like $1.75 of a fee they just inserted in there periodically. Anyway, they ended up getting a couple $1 million. It caught up with them eventually, and the feds came in and arrested them or indicted them, and he ended up doing 2-3 years, a few years. So but I remember he said one time, because most of his life he'd lived in Europe, he said, "You know what the problem with Americans is?" And I was like, "What's that?" He's like they don't know their place. And I went, "What?" He said, like they're not okay with just getting a job and just going about their business. Like they all want to be rich. They
Mm.
all wanna try, and he's like, "Where in Europe, you're okay, like, I understand I have a job, and this is what I do," and I he's like, "Americans just is that," and I was like, "That doesn't seem like a problem to me," you know? Not necessarily. So,
Yeah. I mean, it depends what you want. They also have a better lifestyle, but they pay a stupid amount of taxes, right? But they don't live to work, right? They work to
yeah,
live. And that's the difference between European culture and here. Personally, coming from nothing and having had to rebuild myself many times in my life, I much prefer it here. I much prefer, all right, I could crash and burn, but at the same time, there's no ceiling to what I could do. That's amazing.
right,
That's what this great
yeah.
experiment is about. That's why we live in what I still believe in. People argue with me all the time about this is the greatest country on earth.
Well, so what did your parents ever end up, you know, getting back into kinda mainstream, you know,
No, they
employment?
my dad bought a dry cleaner, started it with his family, and ran that for 40 years. Working his fingers to the bone, and that's actually where I was looking, and I was like, dude, if this is it, I'm gonna go sleep on the beach because this is not what I want to be doing. Right, like work sucks. And I definitely don't want to be that. No disrespect to blue collar people, whatever. People want to do that. That's cool, but that's not what I wanted to do. Right. What I wanted
Right,
to do is to make an impact, to change the world, to do something that not only excited me, but impacted other people. So by the time I was 13, I started getting this like itch to do stuff, but I was in a very restrictive environment, right? Like, it was kind of written out for me that I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna do this. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll become a dentist or a doctor. And we grew up in this wealthy enclave that was not wealthy when we bought. My parents bought this house. It was like, I don't know, some cult was living there. It was like some Krishna, some kind of commune, and my parents came in, nobody could buy it because these people were literally camped out in the backyard, and they had this beautiful massive swimming pool. They were using it as a koi pond, and they had like frogs and stuff in there, and the brokers couldn't sell it. So my parents came, and they were like, they had a little bit of money from their work and friends and family that they put together and said, look, we're going to buy this house. And literally with kindness, they went in and they started slowly. They brought them some food, they asked them very nicely, and nobody could get these people out. And finally they were like, look, you guys are so nice, what can we do for you? And my folks said, look, we just need you to move, we're trying to build a family here. And they moved, and that area came up very fast. And so here we are. I mean, poor, right? Like I never bought new clothes, never went to restaurants, right? My dad worked at this dry cleaner. So whatever clothes people didn't pick up, that's what I wore the next day. Everything was either too big or too small for me. And we grew up in this area where I started seeing all this affluence. I started seeing dudes in their Ferraris driving down Pacific Coast Highway, right? With, the blonde in the background living that life. And I was like, man, I want that fucking life. How do I get that life? Where do I sign up for that? And I went to my parents, and of course they were clueless. And they said, go talk to the guy next door. He's a doctor. If you become a doctor, Shaahin, that is the way. And I was like, all right, cool. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna become a doctor. That's perfect. Went to see the dude. Matt, dude was fucking fat. He had a big old beer belly. He was bald. Like the wife was fat and bald. The kids were fat and bald. Everybody was fucking miserable. He was like, living to pay his mortgage. I mean, he had the things, right? He had the big house. He had the big car, but he was struggling inside. And I just looked at this guy's eyes after talking to him for 20 minutes, and I said, fuck that. Like, that is if that's the alternative, I'm just gonna go sleep on the beach. And so I bailed. I was just like, there's no path for me here, but I know that there's a better way, right? And I had the wherewithal at a very young age. I wanted to make money. I read all the books. I read, back then there were no self-help books, right? You read Think and Grow Rich. You read like Brian Tracy. It wasn't the whole like genre that we have
right.
now, right? So I read all that. So I went to the library, I borrowed it, I read all that stuff, I earmarked it, I put, notes in it. And so I went off on my own. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna figure something out or die trying.
Okay. So what'd you figure out?
Well, I started getting involved in the electronic music scene. Now we're in the early 90s. And the electronic music scene, the dance scene was
Raves?
picking up. Yeah. I think I got a few years on you. I'm 49 today. It's my birthday, by the way. Um, how old are you,
I'm
Matt?
54. I'll be 55 in a couple
Get the
months.
fuck out of here.
Yeah.
You look good, especially for a white dude. You look good. That's very rare. That's very rare. You got this boyish look to you. It's amazing. Um, okay. So I got involved in the electronic music scene, the rave scene, right? Why? Okay. I needed somewhere to live. So somewhere to sleep at least, 4 hours. When you're in your teens, I was like 15. 4 hours is good. Behind the speakers, I could sneak into the clubs or get to know the club guys. In front of the speakers, very loud. Behind the speakers, it's just a hum and you can go to sleep. So I would go into the clubs and I would crash. Well, what did I notice? Okay, so I noticed that the people throwing the clubs, broke ass motherfuckers. It didn't matter how many clubs they did or how they did it, always broke. The DJs at the time, it wasn't like it is now with the electronic music scene. The DJs also broke ass motherfuckers. So who was making the money? There was somebody subsidizing this. So I started looking around. Can you guess who was subsidizing it, Matt?
I mean, no, I'm thinking that the owner of the place
No, they
or the
always got
drug
stiffed.
the drug dealers?
The drug
What?
dealers. So I was like, dude, that's what I'm going to do. It's perfect. Those guys have the cars, they got the girls, they got all the stuff. That's what I want to do. Right? That's it right there. That's what I want to do. And then I had a moment where I looked back. I looked back to my childhood, right? Because I've been in this country now for I don't know 10 years, right? And when I was a kid and I got into elementary school and we were in elementary school, I had to find a way to get around and to buy stuff. So we would go to the liquor store. I had a little Greek kid who was my buddy, and he would run in and he was cute and he would stuff his jacket with nudie magazines. Remember when magazines were a thing with like
Right.
Playboys and the little bottles of liquor, right? And, glue and, candy and whatever it was, and I would create a distraction. He would walk out because he would fit under those old alarm detectors, and then we would sell them at school. We would have a business. Now, here's the amazing thing. I know you talk a lot about crime. I realized very quickly that I was really fucking bad at crime, and I should not be the one doing crime because we would make a lot of money, but we would always end up in detention. We would always end up in trouble, and I always be getting caught, right? Because they'd be like, "Oh, that Iranian kid, he's the troublemaker." So looking back, now I'm sitting in the clubs, looking at these drug dealers, thinking to myself, "Okay, this is great, but I really should not be doing crime." You know those like you ever see those cartoons with like you got the
Yeah,
angel and
yeah.
the devil on the shoulders, right? And I had those guys talking to me, and they're both saying like, "Dude, you don't do fucking crime." So now I'm thinking, all right, I got to figure out a way to do this. I was like, well, what if I could do this without doing crime? And so the idea hit me. At that time in the 1990s, the biggest drug was ecstasy, MDMA. And the supply of ecstasy had dried up. They couldn't get it. They were blocking it for whatever reason coming from Europe into the United States. The majority of it was coming from Europe. People here didn't really know how to make it as well. So there was no supply. All these drug dealers who are making all this money, millions and millions of dollars, are sitting around going like, crap, we don't have any inventory. But the rave scene, hot as ever. So I thought to myself, man, if I could figure out a way, and mind you, I was sleeping in the back of clubs and in my back seat of my car at this time. I had nothing, no friends, no money, nothing. And I thought to myself, if I could figure out a way to make this stuff and I could make it legal using legal ingredients and then sell it through this distribution network, this illicit distribution network, I might have something, right? Because I can do
So
crime without
so
doing crime.
so when ecstasy first came out, it wasn't illegal. By this point, you're saying they'd made it illegal.
Ecstasy was banned twice. One, I believe, in like 1984, another time in 1987 when it finally became scheduled. And so by the 1990s, yeah, in the 80s, people had it on jars in, the tables at the clubs at the bar. They would have it in jars, and you can go pick one out.
Right.
But eventually, it did get banned, so it became scheduled, and it was, very illegal. Certainly in the 90s. So at this time, it was very illegal. So I went about formulating a natural version of it. And I managed at this point, I don't know how I did it, but I managed somehow to get myself a girlfriend. I managed to convince her to let me cook it up in her kitchen when her father, who was like superintendent, he was some school district guy, and he would leave through the front door. I would come in through the back door and be cooking up samples of this herbal formula. And finally, I got a formula that worked, right? I managed to borrow the ingredients, borrow everything, just, so full of energy that everybody started believing in me, testing it on the kids in the neighborhood until I got something great. And fast forward a little bit, I end up in one of the biggest underground clubs in LA at the time. And standing in front of me is this mega drug dealer. And I am shaking, right? But I know he doesn't have inventory. I've been watching him. I've slept at that club. I know this guy has nothing. And I had a backpack filled with little baggies. I packed it just like real drugs. And I showed up, and, his bodyguards motioned me to come over. And he goes, what the fuck you want, right? I'm out. I can't sell you anything. And I go, no, no, no. It's the other way around. So I got something I want to say. He's like, well, what do you have? He grabs my backpack, opens it up, sees all these bags. He goes, what the fuck is this? At that time, it was about, I don't know, 10 goof-filled balls. I didn't have enough money to buy the machine to put the ingredients inside capsules. So I made it in balls, and we dried it in the oven. I tried to make it look as close to pills as possible, but it worked. And I thought I was going to die. I was pretty sure this was the end of my life. I said, all right, well, I'm fucking going down. And in that moment, and have you ever been at the right place at the right time? Like, just for whatever reason, things work out in your favor.
Yeah.
This was that.
Yes.
This was that moment. This was that moment. So, two girls come up, party people, wanting product. Right, I'm standing a few feet away. This guy's got nothing. Now he's got a choice. He can sell them what I just handed him, or sell him nothing and be broke and lose the customers, maybe to someone else, maybe, whatever. It's like, fuck it. Here you go. He hands it to him. He takes the cash. He looks at me. He tells his bodyguard, hey, don't fucking let him out. Right. Like, and he looks at me as like, something to the degree of like, if you're fucking with me, this will be the last thing you do. Now, I can't tell you how much I sweated, bullets, waiting to see what was going to happen. And people came up to him, and I kept seeing him handing baggies. I was like, wow, is he selling my stuff? Is he selling something else? I don't know. A few hours go by. People are having a good time. He motions over for me to come. The bodyguard takes me over to him. And I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm fucked. I got to wash his car. I don't know. I got to, whatever he wants me to do, I'm going to do so I don't get killed. He goes, hey, kid. I go, yeah. When can you get more?
Right.
And that was it. It went from one guy to dozens of guys to hundreds of guys to thousands of guys all over the world. And it became a global phenomena through the illicit drug trade in clubs. And a lot of those guys went straight because of me. A lot of those guys got distribution contracts. They started getting territories, and it grew up until the point I was, under 20. I was probably like 18, 19. And the news came in.
Where are you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Where are you making this?
So,
now?
Well, initially I was making it out of a girl's kitchen. Finally, right. Once we ramped up, I got manufacturers on board, so private label supplement manufacturers, and I had contracts with 5 or 6 different manufacturers who would produce it for me. I'd give them the formula, I'd give them the raw materials, and they would produce it. We eventually got it down to these beautiful little blue pills. There was 5 in a blister pack, and they came in these beautiful pyramids. And I mean, I spent most of my later teen years doing press. I was on Nightline. I was on Montel Williams. We did all the TV shows, LA Times, New York Times. We had multiple Newsweek covers, People Magazine. Um, and your
Do you
credit.
have any of those tape? Do you have any
Oh
of
yeah,
those
it's
tapes?
all over the internet. Yeah, yeah. This is well documented. I'll tell you a funny thing. So we broke $1 billion in revenue. The news broke that we had done $1 billion. This was a huge phenomenon, right? And this is look, a lot of people on the internet bullshit, and you know that more than anybody, right? There's a lot of bullshit. This is well fucking documented because this was before the internet, and this was documented in press. And I'm living up in the mountains in my house, right? And this guy called me from Details magazine. Details was a big magazine in the 90s. You remember
Yeah, I
Details?
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And Chris Cornell, Soundgarden, was going to be sharing the cover with me. He was going to be on the cover, but they were going to have me on there too. There was a whole thing, because everybody wanted the long hair kid. I had long hair at the time, who's made $1 billion. And they sent this reporter out. Oh my God, what a weenie. And this guy I knew was going to do a hit piece on me, right? So, I kind of played it cool, and then we tried to shake him. He was like following me everywhere. He really wanted to do like a week in the life, and like, he wanted to see me doing shady things. But the fact was, I wasn't really doing anything shady. And then the fucking article came out, right? And the headline on the cover was the $350 million scam. But there was
Mm.
nothing inside the article about a scam. So,
It was clickbait. Clickbait, right?
dude, if you can imagine, I was like, fuck, man. I was like, what's the scam? And I was handing it to my friends, and I was in a panic. I was like, nobody is going to talk to me. I was like, people are going to fucking like hate me after this article comes out because nobody reads, and they're going to see this fucking thing. And it was big. It was like, I mean, I have copies. It was like 8 pages, and the thing came out, and it was explosive. I had women showing up at my door with marriage proposals and gifts. I had people calling me for business deals. I had the head of freaking major investment banks calling me. So it had the opposite effect, which is crazy what I thought. But there I was, a teenager running over 200 employees. I had most of the buildings in Venice Beach were mine. If you threw a stone, you'd probably hit in Venice Beach. You'd probably hit somebody who worked for me. And I had no schooling, had dropped out of high school, and absolutely no idea what I was doing.
I mean, how many employees are working for you? Or you're just subbing all the work
Over
out?
200. Yeah,
Okay.
this is before the internet. We had a phone room. I had a phone room set up with people answering the phone. Okay, economics. You were a numbers guy because I know you were a mortgage broker and did a lot of deals. Okay, pill would cost 25 cents for a package, right? Package of 5 would cost me 25 cents with the packaging and everything. Cash, $20. That's what we sold it
Right.
for all day long. We're printing money, man. $20 a piece all day long. And we would do shows. We did Lollapalooza with the Beastie Boys and the Chili Peppers, and the beer vendors were mad at us because people weren't buying alcohol; they were buying our products. We would do $1 million per show, and that's cash. $1 million
Right.
dollars per show. And there were, I don't know, 30, 40 states. And I actually had people bringing cash in duffel bags. I had to buy vans to have them drive the cash back to LA.
So, well, and banks are taking this cash. You're depositing the cash in banks.
Of course not. That's a totally different story. some,
Okay.
some, some, but some of it we had other avenues to take care of that. But yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, were there at what point did you realize that the federal government wasn't okay with this? That
They were great with it. No, you look. This is one of the problems. So there's a feature film coming out about me, Academy Award winning studio called Believe Entertainment is producing a feature. Paris Hilton's company just signed on. So it's going to be amazing. They're currently in the process of production of the film. One of the crazy things that we came across when we were getting ready to start production of the film is that the crazy thing about my story is that I never did anything to get into trouble for it. They tried, Matt. They tried. I was visited by every three-letter agency on the planet, but we never scammed anybody. We never stole anything. We never did anything illegal. I had crazy things happen to me. So it seemed like I was always the victim of that kind of stuff. But as far as my story goes, look, I was a teenage kid that invented an alternative to illegal drugs that they had no precedence for. So they did call the DEA, and the DEA did come out, and they were like, "What the fuck you want us to do? Like this is a supplement." So then they called the FDA, and the FDA came out. And dude, I don't know. Yeah, I know you met a lot of federal agents. You ever meet FDA agents?
No.
Okay, they're spectacular because they're literally nerds, and I mean, literally nerds. I think most of them. I think you got to have some kind of degree, and like the ones that came out for us had like chemistry degrees. They were chemists, and because they put them in the enforcement end, they get guns and badges, and I'm pretty
Right.
sure they didn't know how to use them. So they show up at our office and doing the whole like we can kick down your door thing, and I was like, cool. This is an office, not a production facility, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they're like going around opening doors. They didn't find anything. We're a supplement manufacturer. So what they got us on was claims. There was this law back then that said that if you say something is a drug, then it's similar to a drug. Therefore, you should get in trouble for it being a drug. But it wasn't criminal penalty; it was a civil penalty. So they slammed down on that. They got all the three-letter agencies audit this, audit that. Really trying hard. And at that time, the president at the time, I think it was a Bush or Clinton, I forget, assigned a new head to the FDA. Part of his directive was to figure out how to get rid of me. And this guy went on Nightline with me. He refused to be on the same show as me. But Sam Donaldson, the great interviewer with Nightline, managed to get him on too. So he came on and he was like, "Look, it's too late for us to act. The horse is out of the cart or whatever." And then I did the whole media circuit, and I held very strongly that look, people are going to do, especially young people are going to do illegal drugs. That's the wrong way to think about this. We're a harm reduction measure. And we spun it that way, but the way they got to us was by applying pressure. And what I learned is that no matter how right you are, you can never win against the government. They have an unlimited budget. And if there's someone there that has an agenda against you, you're done. There's you better settle with them. But I was a snot-nosed little kid. I was arrogant, and I really like had
How old
my
are you
in my teens.
at this time?
Yeah, I was in my
Okay.
teens. And so I was like, fuck this, right? And really, look, here's the crazy thing, right? I know your stuff, a lot of it was criminal. My stuff, a lot of it was almost all of it was civil, right? And so with civil stuff, they just want you to pay, dude. It's the most
Right.
insane thing. I had no education, right? But the lawyers are coming to me going, all right, so this three-letter agency, the FTC, the FDA, yeah, you did this violation or that violation, it's going to be $27,000. And I was like, what? Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. This is really bad. You got to pay $137,000. We were making hundreds of millions of dollars. So the intelligent thing to have done would have been to have just paid them. They just want to get paid.
Right.
I never paid a dime. Never paid a dime. I settled a bunch of the
Wow.
stuff, but I never paid a dime because I was so arrogant. But I was paying, you pay either way. Lawyers, accountants, you pay either way. So the smart thing to do is to pay them. You cooperate a little bit, you tell them what they want to hear. You do a couple mea culpas and you're done. That's how it's worked in the corporate world for however many years, right? You think that like Apple doesn't have to do that, Microsoft doesn't have to, they all do that. They just pay. You just pay and you're done. But I refused to do that. I had all these great ideals And that ultimately was what led kind of to the downfall of that.
How so?
Look, man, I was a kid. I was under a lot of pressure. At this point, too, and you'll see, I mean, I wrote a book on this called Billion, How I Became King of the Throw Pill Cult. Anybody wants to check it out, there's an audio book on Audible, or you can get it on Amazon. Billion, singular, How I Became King of the Throw Pill Cult. And that's what the film is based on that's coming out. And I just remember as a kid, all the pressure got to me, right? I felt like I was being chased, and I was. They really, really like turned the heat up very high. So I was being surveilled. Like I had a beautiful mansion in Celebrity Row in Malibu that I owned, cash, and they had like processed served like every day I would get served with something. And it was just fucking nerve wracking. I'd like go out through the back. I made a little ladder to go out through the back on the beach and go around so they would just freaking stop serving me. But I was being followed. They would follow me places. And the heat just got too much for me. Like I couldn't handle. I was like, man, screw this. Eventually, if I continue doing this, they will find something to get me on. And even though I honestly truly was innocent of any wrongdoing. So eventually I slowly got out of that, and got into, believe it or not, more lucrative businesses with a lot
Well,
less pressure.
how did you get out of it? You just closed the whole thing down and walked
I sold
away?
the
I mean, or
assets. Yeah, yeah. No, I just sold the assets over time, and yeah, sold the assets and just walked away. At first, I was a kid. I was like, you know what, man? Like, I could do this again. It's so crazy, right? Like looking at it, going, okay, I'm an immigrant. I didn't even fucking speak English when we came to this country, and grew up through nothing. And I built a fucking company that created over $1 billion in revenue during my teens. And somehow in that time, I was fucking thinking to myself, like, yeah, yeah, no problem. I'll just hand over the keys. I'll do it again. Like, how fucking insane is that, right? That's like, I made a film with Vanilla Ice a long time ago,
okay.
right? I was a huge fan back then, and I made a film with him, and I remember thinking to myself, like, he had that one song, right? The one song, and that was it,
Yeah.
right? Ice Ice Baby. And I remember when I brought him on to do this film, the film was so bad, and I remember bringing him on to do this film. I had a great idea for this film, and sitting with the guy, and the thing that I realized is, fuck, man, this guy had that one big song, but he doesn't realize that's it. That's all she wrote. Like, and I have lots of friends actually that are rock stars that have had that one song, right? But they don't realize that, like, that's it. That was the height of what you were doing. Like, that will not happen again. And it's one of those things. It's one of those fallacies where we don't realize that there's a time, there's a place, there's a moment, and if you grab it and capitalize on it, that is your moment. And likely it's not going to happen like that ever again. Now, I learned as I got older, I learned, hey, man, it doesn't have to be this like meteoric rise and fall. It doesn't have to be these fireworks. What you can do is build uh, multiple streams of revenue and more consistent, more conservative plays, but it doesn't have to be fireworks. It can just be several conservative plays that over time bring you even more revenue. And that's what I built. I got involved in Amazon in the early days when Bezos had launched the platform, opened it for sellers. Now I teach an Amazon course where I teach people how to do what I do. We've had multiple exits in Amazon. I got involved in podcasting very early. So I got involved in real estate also, especially where you're at. It's amazing real estate some years back. Um, so those things don't bring about as much attention as this like firework time, but I think even, guys like us who've had these like massive single successes, and I still consider you, buddy, I consider you a success story. And I know I saw the commercial that you did where like, oh, I'm a con man, all this. I don't see you as a con man like that. Right. I think, and this is what's interesting, I think, with you actually. I'm diverging a little bit, but And by the way, I couldn't find your American Greed episode. I want to watch that. Is there one?
I there is, but it's not available. I have the link to it because I actually have a copy.
Okay.
And we actually, my buddy and I just, I have a buddy named Zach. We just did a review of it. I reviewed the Dateline episode like a couple weeks ago, and then we just did American Greed like a week ago, and I think it'll be up in probably a couple days.
Okay.
But I'll give you the link. I can give you the
Send me the
link to
link.
the American Greed.
I'm American Greed addict. But those things are so fucking scripted, man, right? Because they want
I know.
to tell this narrative, right? So you got the guy, everything's going great, and then this thing happened. Every single one falls. And then right when they start talking about the hookers and the blow, you're like, there it goes. But the thing is, I see guys like you as it's not like you're miles away. You're not like fucking a psychopath, murdering, serial killing, like fucking maniac. You're just like an inch off from what the guy who did what you did and didn't fucking get caught, or he did a little bit differently, and he's now living in the big mansions and driving the big cars. It's not that much different. It's not miles away. It's like those big marathons. The difference between the guy that comes in first place and the guy that nobody remembers is really just seconds of time. And so that's how I see guys like you, and you especially, man. I mean, dude, I've been scammed a lot. It was a time, it was a place. You capitalized on it. Some of your story is pretty fucking crazy. But after you go on the run, that's where it goes a little nuts. But before that
Right.
point, I mean, how many guys did what you did who just fucking now are living the life?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I ended it caught up with me. So if it hadn't caught up with me, you just those people that it didn't catch up with, we'll never know.
You'll never know. You'll never
Never
know.
know.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think you were doing, like individual cons of like, I don't see what you did as being as damaging as some of the other stuff, in the true crime world. So,
Right.
and I think there's levels of great, but you paid your time, right? You paid your time. You did what? You did 13 years, is that right?
13.
Holy
Yeah.
fucking shit, man. That's got to be insane.
Yeah. The first 10's the hardest. The last three, it just blew by. Um, so I have a question for
Yeah.
you. What'd you sell on Amazon when you said he opened it up for sellers? Like what
Yeah.
was that gig?
So I started looking at this platform, right? This little bald guy with these like cinder block desk in his office. And I'm like, this guy's not a fucking nerd. I started reading up on Bezos and everything that he was doing. I'm like, this guy comes from big money, venture capital. He worked for one of the biggest firms, money firms in the country. He's smart. And Amazon, remember, it used to be books in the beginning. And then he
Right.
opened it up to CDs, and then he opened it up to a few other things and movies. And then all of a sudden he goes, you know what? We're going to enable third party sellers to sell on our platform. And I thought to myself, that's interesting. So anybody could sell anything. I was like, cool. I know how to do supplements. Let me put that on there. So I came up with a brain supplement, a really freaking good brain health supplement. And we've since sold that. But I thought, let me put this up on there. Put it up on there overnight. And remember, there was no competition. We were one of the first on there. The next morning, it was $100 a pop. The next morning, we had over 1,000, 2,000 orders, like a couple hundred grand in a night just for posting a
Right.
product. I was like, holy shit, there's something to this. I went all in on Amazon, and we started our company, Amazon Mastery, where I have three parts of it. One is I consult for companies. I show them how to sell products on Amazon. We help accelerate their brands on there. The second part is I have a course called Amazon Mastery where I teach people how to put their products on Amazon. And the third is we have our own products that we sell on Amazon. So I've been doing that since 2009, roughly around then.
Did you see the movie Middlemen?
No, what's
Or
it
is it
about?
Middlemen or
Tell me.
Middlemen or Middleman? It's basically the internet had just come out, right?
Yeah.
And this guy, I don't know, one of the guys is a weirdo, and the other guy is also a weirdo, but he's also like super techie. And the one guy says, "Look, you know what we ought to do? We ought to start selling porn on the internet." And he's like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, let's." And he's, "Oh, I can set it up." And he actually steals a server from his job. Well, first he doesn't do that. They just run it through like the computer through a server. But it immediately. It's funny because he's like, "Well, how will we know when we have a sale?" After he sets up like the website, he's like, "I got it. So I got this bell. It'll just make a bing." He's like, "Okay." And he sits. Yeah, yeah, it's the scene is hilarious because they're like, they put it up and, "Well, what do we do now?" He's like, "I mean, we just wait. Like, we have people have to find the site." Like, they don't know what they're doing. It's the infancy of the internet, and they're laying there, like one's on the couch and one's on a chair. So I forget, but they're sitting and all of a sudden they hear a bing. They're like, "Hey, we got a sale," and I don't know what it was, $5, $3,
Yeah.
something. And then he's like, "Oh, that's great, man. That's amazing. Wow. So how long did that take? Like, I mean, if we get one sale every bing," and he's, "Oh man, that's another sales. That's 2 sales in like what, 2 hours? Like ding, 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 ding." I mean, they're like, listen, it gets to the point where that thing is just ding, 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 ding. I mean, they're like, "Oh my god." So the guy gets up and he goes to his work and he walks in, he says, "I quit," and he grabs a server and walks out of the fucking place because they need a server. They don't have any money yet.
Dude.
It's just the sales are going through, but they don't actually have money yet. It's so they're still trying to figure out like how to process.
Yeah.
And so they bring in another guy. He figures out how to actually process like credit cards and everything through so they end up being just middlemen, right? So they've got the same thing. They have guys that are providing porn
Sure.
and photos and videos.
Yeah.
Um, and then they're just selling it. So they're like, we're just the middleman. We don't make anything.
Yeah.
But it's a great movie. I mean, it's how quickly they start just the money just starts rolling in.
Wow.
But yeah, eventually they end up a couple of the guys get busted. So
Yeah, look, I mean, here's the other thing that I learned from watching these kind of like true crime stuff. And I'm a huge true crime fan. A lot of these guys, yourself included, I think the energy and the thought and the strategy that goes into doing these crimes, if only they had the stick to itiveness to do that
right,
with non-criminal activities, or figure out how to do it in a way where you're not getting busted, or doing it, kind of an up and up way where it's not against the law, you probably could hugely succeed, like do incredible stuff. Like I was watching this thing on this guy, he's like kind of like the slovenly fat fucking, who's the guy who did all the crypto shit, what's his name, Sam,
Sam
that guy.
Bankman-Fried.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
guy, right? And I'm thinking, all right, so like a little rich kid, right? Who's, I mean, he's living a weird life, but he's fucking genius. Like what he's doing is like this guy could have made
he ran
it.
a Ponzi.
Say again?
He ran a Ponzi scheme.
But he
It
could have done,
wasn't
yes,
partially a Ponzi
he
scheme.
did. No, he
Partially,
totally did that. But I have zero doubt that he could have done it without that. Same with the lady with the
right?
blood
Right.
testing shit. What was it? The blonde lady?
Yeah. Come on, Holmes, Elizabeth
Yeah,
Holmes.
creepy as fuck. But
Yeah, with
look,
the turtleneck and the deep voice. And like, what are you doing?
I
She's
looked at
just
that, bro. She raised $1 billion. I looked at that and I thought to myself, I was like, man, all they had to do, right? I saw the pivot point. The pivot point was when that fucking machine didn't work. They had to make it like the size of a fucking whatever, like a cake machine or some shit, and it didn't work. All they had to do is say, you know what? We're gonna be like Quest Pharmaceuticals. We're gonna do the same thing Quest does, but for a little bit less. And that's it. And we've got this other thing in the background that we're developing. That's it. But no, they had to
right.
have the fucking fireworks, and she had to be the fucking superstar, and she fucked
Yeah,
it up.
she had to say it's gonna run, "Oh, it's gonna run 300 of the major tests, within 30 minutes," and it's like, "What are you doing?" Like, everybody has told you that's not possible. Every fucking biologist, every scientist, everybody you've hired has told you this isn't possible, and "Oh, no, we're gonna develop the tech." Well, that sounds good. I'm sure you read that in a magazine somewhere, but that doesn't mean it's gonna happen, so Yeah, she started I mean, yeah, she listen, she definitely went all in on the criminal thing. I feel she went much deeper into into a scam than Sam Bankman-Fried. I mean, he's just made some bad he made some bad trades and then just kept trying to cover it up and cover it up. She's literally staging demonstrations where they're swapping out the blood and they're running blood to get it tested here. Like you got a whole scam going on where it's like the 3 card Monty fucking scam here with your machine. You know what 3 card Monty is?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the cards,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the playing cards, where which card is it? Which card is it? She's got a whole thing going on with the blood machine where she would have investors come in and they'd take blood from them and they'd put it in the machine. They go, it's going to take about 30 minutes. Let's go ahead and see the rest of the place. And then they'd have somebody grab the samples, run out and test them, use other equipment to test it, come back and say, here's your results.
Yeah. And,
And they'd be like, this is amazing. Yeah, it's also fabricated.
but do you think, Matt? Okay, you're an expert on this stuff. Do you think that these folks, her, Sam Bankman, if they just like, if there was like a stopper that they couldn't do criminal stuff, like it was just somebody would come up from the sky, stop them from doing that. Do you think these people could be hugely successful without doing that?
Yeah, I think Sam Bankman-Fried was successful prior to starting FTX. He just to him, it just what he was doing, which is I think it was arbitrage. It just for some reason wasn't enough for him. Oh, I got to go bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, and then he just started doing unethical things. And with her, I think she just wouldn't listen to people. She had this grandiose concept, but she's clearly a salesperson.
Yeah.
She clearly, if she had a, if she take, just like you said, if she tapered down her vision so that it wasn't so over the top, she probably would be sitting on $1 billion company right now, a legitimate $1 billion company. She had people who were ready to invest in her.
Yep.
People were, I think Walgreens gave her like 300 or 400 million or something outrageous. I mean,
It's crazy.
how do you fool these major companies? But yeah, she could. She just instead of, it's like, hey, I'm going to develop a vehicle that gets 80 miles to the gallon,
Yep.
and meets all the regulatory standards. It's just as good as buying a Ford or any other vehicle. It looks and it's going to look good. No, she has to throw in, or these two knuckleheads throw in there, and it can fly. Whoop,
That's what
what?
I'm
You have to see the engineers that are like, "Whoop,
saying.
what? Who said fly? Did someone say fly?" Oh yeah, and it also, it can go, what I'm saying? It can hold 60 people or, it's not a bus. What are you doing? What are you doing? Stop her from talking. Yeah, so I see what you're saying. Some people just they go over the top. They don't know when to stop.
She's scripting the American greed for them live.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what? I was gonna say, this is who's doing it the right way, which is still over the top, but for some reason he's winning. Is Elon Musk?
Yeah.
It's like it's insane. It's like what do you like? Who the fuck becomes like a billionaire and says, "I'm thinking Mars. I think we go to Mars." Like, are you out of your what? I'm thinking we're gonna build we're gonna start building robots. What about robots? Like that's a thing, right? Can we make that a thing? Like that's insane.
He's
Did you know
rare.
he just announced that all the self-driving cars, they're gonna be able to put them in like a few months, they're gonna start putting them on a platform so that you can go on the platform and you drive your car to work,
Mhm.
you park, you go into work. You put your car on, you say, my car is now active on the platform. I can go on the platform, just like Uber, and say, hey, I need somebody to pick me up. Your car will start up, drive down the street, pick me up, drop me off where I want to go, and then wait for the next person to pick up.
He's
So
so
while
next
you're
level.
at work,
Yeah.
your car's making its payment and then some while you're sitting at your job your car may be making more money than you are. And I mean, that like to me, like that's going to, I'd say 5 years from now, Uber's not even a thing anymore. It's all self-driving electric vehicles.
He's so next level. I think he's not even human. It's
Yeah.
unusual the level of stuff that he does, and he is the new Henry Ford. He is an extraordinary human.
Did you see
Interesting.
the
So I'll tell you a funny story. So we were talking about the Elizabeth Holmes thing. So this is probably as close as I came to a scam back in the herbal ecstasy days. So, all right. So I've got a big distributorship in Japan back in these days, right? And you can't really do anything in Japan and like a lot of industries without the mob getting involved. And the Japanese
right?
mob, the Yakuza, is no joke.
Who's that? Yeah.
Funny enough, in Japan, I didn't know this until I went there multiple times. Iranians in Japan are like the underclass criminal class. I had no idea. I was like, why are people fucking treating me so weird? They're like, yeah, like the criminals here in Japan are the Iranians. I was like, holy shit. Okay, cool. Um,
Quick, quick,
eh,
quick, quick wait, wait. I gotta tell you one thing real quick. I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard this, and I always thought, wow, the Yakuza. I heard the Yakuza is so ingrained in their culture that if you're a corporation and you pay protection money to the Yakuza, you're allowed to write it off as a tax exemption.
Holy shit. Wow.
I don't know if that's true, but that seems like it's like, wow, like they literally budget for it. And we're probably gonna be hit for about 2,000 a month for the Yakuza, but we can write it off on our taxes. And it's like, that's insane.
So I've got some crazy stories in my book. But so basically, they're involved, not directly through me, but through a distributor that I had there. Because if you're selling that stuff, you're in bed with them. And so we got to make these pills. They want 1 million pills. So we got to make 1 million pills to ship to Japan. Japan, you got to make them in animal shapes. Otherwise, it's a drug. The workaround I had is if you make them in animal shapes, it's a food and not a drug. So they can get them and
It's a,
sell them. So I'm
so it looks
making
like a
herbal.
bear,
What's that?
or it looks like a teddy bear,
Yeah, yeah,
or
like
turtle.
Flintstone vitamins or whatever, right? So I had to find a guy, it wasn't my regular manufacturer, to do this. Now, this guy was an old school, like it's like Vietnamese families love buying, back in those days, like these manufacturing businesses come in here from Vietnam. So it was a Vietnamese family, and I didn't know them. And so I gave him the formula. We sent him the ingredients, and the pills were done. 1 million pills. We were late, like 2 weeks, and I had to get the stuff on a ship. So the stuff gets on a ship, and it gets there. And I had an auditor go over there to audit, and he's like, "Dude, these your raw materials. What color were they?" And I'm like, "Brown. They're extracts." He's like, "It's orange." I'm like, "Orange?" He's like, "Yeah, the samples are orange." Like, what the fuck? Now this stuff is there. We've already had a lot of heat. My distributor is like fucking like he's like, this could be the end of me if I don't get the goods in. And so I'm like, well, run it up to a lab. Let's see what's in there. I assumed the guy thought we weren't gonna run it to a lab. Go to the lab, get the results like I paid for a rush. Fucking carrot powder, the cheapest ingredient on earth. He didn't use our ingredients in the pills. So now there's 1 million pills waiting
Hmm.
at the warehouse in Japan, about to go to these Yakuza guys. Um, and I'm like, holy fucking shit, what do we do? What do we do? So I'm talking to my guys. I'm like, man, this could really, really be bad. And so I'm like, I'm just gonna sleep on it. We'll call them in the morning. We'll figure something out. I'll have to remake it. We'll airship it. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and my phone's blown up. And back then we didn't have email, we have faxes. It's just like all these things in my faxes. I'm like, oh fuck, we are so fucked. And I'm like, I call and I'm like, hey man, I gotta tell you something. He's like, no, 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 it was like one of those, I gotta tell you something. Like, no, 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 okay, listen. He's like, no, 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 you listen to me. And I was like, oh fuck, we are done. And he's like, dude, whatever you put in that last batch, we just took it to like the biggest party in Tokyo. It was the best you ever made. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, that's amazing. Make more of that. And I was like, holy shit, fucking placebo effect. And they
Right.
sold all 1 million of them. Nobody ever heard anything of it. That was the end of that phone call. But that was as close as we got to, and then I had it out with the manufacturer here, who the guy denied it, but we were like, oh man, we got lab results. Funny enough, right?
I Yeah, I was gonna say I had a buddy who used to. So there was a, I forget the name of it. There was an herbal. menstrual pill, like for menstrual cramps, but it was herbal,
Yeah.
right? And he said it looked a lot like he said, "Looked very, very much like ecstasy." And he said, so we would go buy them, and he said, and I'd get little baggies, and I'd put, like, 2 pills in it, and he would go around because he was homeless. I wrote a book on this guy.
Oh, wow.
So this is when he was a kid. He's, like,
Yeah.
13, 14 years old. He goes, "So I would walk up and down the beaches to the tourists on in Miami Beach." But he would actually travel he said, on the bus line from Miami. He said, "I'd go all the way up." He said, "Every week." And he'd just do a rotation. He goes, "'Cause nobody's there a week later. If I sold it to some guy who came down from Michigan, he's not there 7 days later. He's only in Miami for a few days." So he would go and he'd walk around and he'd say, "I got that X, I got that X, I got that X." And they go, "What? You do? How much?" He'd be like, $20 or $40, whatever it was. He said, "One time I sold a couple of bags to somebody, and then I forget what happened." He said he left and he went to another beach that wasn't far from there. And he said he saw the same guy, and the guy came up to him and he goes, "Yo, hey, hey." And he was like, he said, I mean, listen, he said, I was terrified. He said, "I almost started running, but there were 2 bicycle cops
Yeah.
right beside me." He goes, "So I thought if I take off running, they're going to chase me."
Mm.
So he said, and if I take off running, I'm sorry, he said, so I'm sorry, he said, "So I didn't take off running because I also thought there's 2 bicycle cops right here. He's
Yeah.
not going to hurt me."
Yeah.
The guy walked right up to him and said, "Bro, you got any more of that?" And he goes, and the guy pulled out some money and he goes, "Here, come over here." And he says, like, so we walk around the corner and he gives me some money. And I give him 2 more bags. He's like, "Man, I appreciate it, bro. Thanks." And walked off.
Yeah.
He's like, I mean, he goes, "It was fake.
Yeah.
It was herbal menstrual pills." It was like,
Placebo
so yeah,
strong, but this was very crazy. And then we had a couple other instances. Yeah, I write about it in the book. It'll be in the movie where I flew out there basically to negotiate for my company because they were like, "We own your company now, or we gonna own it," and I didn't want to do
but this is the Yakuza?
yeah. I didn't know that's who it was, but it's one of those things, like if you're doing business in certain places, you're in bed with, like you said, with those people, and they're embedded in the mainstream. But somehow, as a kid, I kind of followed my intuition. I had a good intuition about me. And so all those things that I think could have gotten me into like real trouble, I had a tendency to avoid. Now I was scammed several times, like super crazy scammed. I had over $1 million of merchandise back then stolen by employees. I had one fucking dude. Okay. So this guy I hired, right? This fucking guy. And people told me I was so stupid because I was so young. And people thought, oh man, this kid came into all these millions. He's got these fancy cars and the girls and the houses and all this. Like he's not gonna miss anything. And this fucking dude would work for me, and he had a rough life, and I was just trying to help the guy out. And he had his girlfriend who'd like roller skating with her bikini on the beach, right? And she would just show up to bring him his lunch and kiss him and go off, and he'd be working in the office. I'm like, this guy's the greatest worker. He's vacuuming, he's taking out the trash. This is great. What was he doing? He was filling up trash bags with our pills, dumping them in the fucking dumpster behind our office in Venice Beach. And his
Right,
chick would skate behind, pick up the trash bags, and immediately go sell our stuff on the beach.
right. Yeah,
Insane.
I can see that.
And the other thing that was always insane to me was how little the authorities actually gave a shit. Like,
Right,
we reported the guy. I called the cops. They were like, "Yeah, this sounds like a civil matter." I was like, "What?" I don't know how people get away with this shit, but this is how people get away with this shit. I'm like, this guy, this was before everybody had cameras, but I was like, you can come to my office. You could see him taking the bags, putting them in the trash. They're like, yeah, but is he not just taking out the trash? How do we know he's stealing stuff and putting it in the trash? I'm like, it's got serial numbers on it. It always shocks me, right? Like if it was me doing anything remotely like crime, I am positive, Matt, that I would be arrested in jail 5 times. Like no thought about that. But like anybody else, I like look at it, especially in this country. I'm like, holy shit, the cops don't give a fuck. Absolutely. And they were like, the guy got away. They were like, oh, it's a civil thing. So I had to fire him. He actually had the gall to ask me if he was going to get a severance. I was like, bro,
Right.
you taking about 10 grand a day in pills and sell your girlfriend's selling it on the beach, and I just busted you. And you think you're gonna get a severance? You asking me for yeah, man. It's times.
So I have a question. What happened with the guy with the Yakuza when they said they own your business and you said you flew out there
I
to have a
flew out there. It
conversation?
was a very difficult negotiation. I mean, it was like a movie set, right? We were in one of those what they call ryokans. They had the girls that served the tea, and it was a very very tense negotiation. But we managed to negotiate something that worked for them. I can't say exactly, but I write about it a bit in the book. But I just say anything having to do with tobacco, pills, uh, tourism, anything like that is very very heavily regulated by them. But in all fairness, I felt like they were honorable guys. I feel like if you don't fuck with them, and you hold your own, they will respect you. And so I feel like a lot of times, you can be reasonable in unreasonable situations and be able to manage pretty well, because everybody's trying to live a good life. Everybody's trying to be fair. Everybody wants, to be treated fairly. And it's usually when people get fucked with where there's problems. And so I understood that it was a very heavy type of a situation, and that's just not the life that I was wanting to be involved in, or was involved in. Like I see a lot of times. I feel like kind of a lot of people bring that stuff about them, right? Like there's stuff that happens to mafia guys. Like I know you had an interview with Michael Francesi, Francesi. What is it? How do you say his name?
Francis.
Michael
Francis.
Francis. Yeah, fascinating guy, very interesting. It was a good interview. But like you see the things that happen in that lifestyle. And like I feel like most people, you got a choice, right? I mean, unless you're caught in crossfire, most people have a choice where you're like, you know what? Like, I'm not gonna bring that into my sphere of influence. Like, I'm not gonna bring that stuff into my life. And I feel like when I was young and starting this company, even though I didn't know what I was doing, and a lot of that stuff was happening around the periphery, that I made the right choices to kind of, go around that stuff, and to not let it affect, no decisions that could permanently affect my future in that way. You know,
Yeah. Um, I was gonna say when FedEx, I want to say it was FedEx or UPS. I watched a. It was a. This was just after the wall had come down and all the Baltics countries were breaking off from the old Soviet Union. And they opened it themselves up to starting new businesses, right? Like McDonald's came in, and a bunch of American manufacturers came in to open up factories and start selling products. And I remember one of the things that, so I watched a 2020, and I want to say it was either UPS or FedEx. They were talking about how they'd gone there to start, to open up, and they'd been told by all of these people in the government, like, come, we're ready to really, open up and help you. And he's like, so we get there and we're trying to open up our store. And he's like, but we need permits and things like that. So we go to the permit office. He's like, I go in there. I'm like, hey, I'm from FedEx. And, I've filled out the paperwork. Here's the papers, what's the next step? I need to pay. And they're like, right. They're like, no, you don't pay it yet. We have to review everything. Okay. So he said, he reviews it. And I'm like, well, how long will that take? It's, oh, I don't know. A little bit. So I wait, and he lets him wait there. Like there's like 4 hours left in the day. He's
yeah.
like, I wait like 4 hours. He said, and the guy's like, well, they're closing up. He's like, oh, come back tomorrow. We should have it tomorrow. And he's like, are you sure? He said, I can refer you to someone that can help you fill the paperwork out. So make sure it's perfect. So it goes through really smoothly. And he's like, no. He's like, I understand the paperwork. We have a translator, and I've got it. We're good. He's like, okay. Next day he comes, he sat all day. Next day he came, he said, I sat halfway through the day. And the guy, at one point, I said, look, how long is this going to take? And he looked at him and he said, it goes a lot smoother if you go to the guy that knows how to fill out the paperwork. He goes, and I look down and he's like, my my envelope is with this paperwork is sitting on the desk. And he's like, okay, he said, I think I understand. He's like, I'm not really. He's like, so we didn't really. He said, let me go back and talk to my people. So we go back and we talk to his boss. He's like, look, I think these guys want to bribe, and they're like, well, we're not going to bribe anybody. He's like, well, they want me to use their person. Oh, well, you filled all the paperwork correctly, right? Yes. Well, let me call. So then they call somebody in the government. They talk to him. They call down there. They come back. He says, I'm sorry about that. Go in tomorrow. He goes in tomorrow. And the guy sits there and he says, yeah, I got a phone call. I understand. We're going to start processing the paperwork. And he said, but it'd go a lot smoother if you use this other guy. And he's like, yeah, but you got the call. He's like, I know. And I told him I'd jump right on it. And another day another day goes by. He said, literally, he says, you know what? Let me call your fucking guy. He goes to his boss. His boss is like, just call this guy. Calls the guy. He said, the guy meets me in the like the waiting area.
Yeah.
He walks over to him, or he tells him, look, it's whatever it was. Like nothing. It was like $1,500 or something.
Yeah.
It's $1,500 to hire me. He pays him right then. He walks over to the guy. He opens up the paperwork. He flips through the paperwork. He hands it to him and he says, yeah, it's perfect. It's fine. Boom. You have to pay a $50 fee. We give you the permit. Like just like that. Boom. He's like, I wasted an entire week. He said, the problem is that the government has turned into, he said, the mafia.
Yeah.
And he said, and they're very good at what they do. Like he's like, that wouldn't fly in the US. There are laws that say I can't recommend you go to somebody. I can't even recommend a lawyer for you to talk to. Like if you were to go to public records
Sure.
or go to and say, hey, I want to file this permit. They say, okay, well, you got to fill out the permit. Okay, well, hey, do you know anybody that can help me? Yeah, I can't recommend anybody. I'm not allowed to. By law, you're not allowed to recommend anybody because of things like that. So they've got a whole, some of these countries, the mafias, the scam is so ingrained.
Yeah.
That it's just a part of the government.
Yeah, people would argue that it's the same here, right? And I got to tell you, it's a funny thing. I almost find it a little refreshing, the small time corruption, because you kind of know that's like, it is what it is. There's no illusions about it, right? Like in the case you were describing, of course, it seems like the people were a little bit naive about how things work. But in general, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is how it is. I give you $20 and I get off the ticket, right? In most places, and you're like, okay. What's bothersome is when they're so corrupt and they make like they're righteous, and that's the thing that's troubling to me. Hypocrisy, right? Because if they're like, look, we're corrupt. Here's the corruption. It's small time corruption, right? We got to eat. Everyone's got to eat. You kick down a little bakshish and you're done. I'm like, oh, that's actually refreshing. That's who you are, right? Great.
Yeah, but at least it gets done. As long as it gets done.
So look, here's the thing, right? Now I I run multiple businesses, 8-figure business. I've got one 9-figure business. I coach people all the time on how to make money. I teach people through my Amazon course how they can make money on Amazon. And Amazon's actually a perfect example of this. You cannot win in business without having an unfair competitive advantage. And I learned this, back in the day when I was day trading. I day traded for a number of years after herbal ecstasy, doing heavily leveraged commodities, gold, oil, all that kind of stuff. And I learned very quickly that there's, really 3 people more or less, right, who are making a profit consistently, right? It's people who have some type of unfair advantage or information, right? Be it insider trading, or they have some way of gathering information that you and I don't have access to. It's the people who sell the courses on how to get rich, or how to trade, or how to do that. The big money in courses and education. And the third are people who get lucky, and that's it. You can't time the market. Business is a little bit different, and I tell people this all the time, because there are ways where you can legitimately, legally, within the rules of business, get an unfair advantage. And there's different levels of that. So you've got white hat, gray hat, and black hat. Believe me, 100% of the major corporations in this country, in every country, do white hat and gray hat. And they push the levels of gray to the end. Where they don't go over is what they do in black hat. right? And then when you go into black hat stuff, you have varying levels of that. You have civil issues, and then you have criminal stuff, right? So if you can manage to stay in the gray, white hat kind of stuff, you can win. If you stay just do what they tell you by the rules, you're never going to win, right? You might have a job. You might have a way of selling your hours. You might have a way of like struggling like everybody else. But when you see one company getting above another and succeeding, one person succeeding over another, that person
Right.
has an unfair advantage. And that's what I've spent the last 20 years, 30 years developing these systems that I teach people on. How do you develop an unfair advantage without doing stuff that's against the law, that hurts people, and doing stuff that helps people?
Yeah, I was gonna say I have an unfair. I always, because like the two guys that I was talking to, right, on that video you watched the other day, Tom and Wade, like, you know, like their channels are. I think Tom's probably he might have 20 or 30,000 subscribers. Wade's approaching 10,000,
Yeah.
and I got like 240,000. So, and we Wade started out basically, I think, about the same time I started out. And Tom's been doing it maybe a little bit longer. But I have an unfair advantage because I have a story, and I know that. Like I'm not like, oh, I'm just that good. No, I have a story that allows me to go on bigger platforms and kind of conscript their subscribers and pull them over to my side, over to my platform. So that's one, example. And then I was gonna say, you just mentioned the other thing, the timing.
Mm.
It's impossible. It's impossible really to schedule timing. Like it's just luck sometimes. So and I give an example of that. I interviewed this guy that wanted or has a theory about OJ Simpson basically having another guy that was with him when he committed the murders,
Mhm.
of Nicole Brown
Sure.
and Ron Gold Gold Goldman. Anyway, um, so he's got this whole theory on how whatever it's I don't even know, but he's got this whole theory, right? That OJ owed money. He went to go get it from for drug debt, which doesn't even make sense because he's worth millions of dollars. But whatever, this guy's got a whole theory. He's got all these different. So listen, I need content. He's interested in telling me the story. We did a StreamYard. Okay, we'll do this. Maybe it does well. Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
Even if it's a StreamYard, even if it does badly for me, it gets 10,000 views. It could be a filler video, whatever.
Sure.
So we do it. We talk to him. Okay. Colby, my editor, is like, I'm going to hold this until we have, because what we'll do sometimes is we'll put out a video. So let's say we put out, sometimes we'll think, hey, this should be a good video. We put it out and we think it's going to get 20,000 in the first day or maybe 30 for whatever. And then the next 3 or 4 days, it'll get 50, right? So we think, okay, that's for my platform. That's good. And so we put out the video and it gets 8,000 views.
Yeah.
And it's already trailing down. And you can see that. So Colby's like, shit, you know what? Throw another video in that we already feel like probably isn't going to do great, but at least it'll give us another 8 to 10,000 views.
Sure.
So he'll do it back to back. So sometimes people are like, damn, like you put out 5 videos like, wow. Yeah. So we put out his video thinking it's not going to be a hugely successful video. We put it out. OJ Simpson dies the next day.
No way.
That video, and here's what's even funnier is it was actually did okay. Like the first day, it
Mm.
got like 14,000 views the first day.
Yeah.
It was like, this is like this may have by tomorrow, it may be at 20,000 views. Like that's
Sure.
pretty good.
Yeah.
But instead, that 14,000 views, and I was driving to the doctor,
Mm.
right? At a doctor's appointment. And I got my cell phone up, like that you clip it on the front, you got those things that hold your phone. So it's clip. And I'm driving, so I'm looking at my phone for the GPS. And I have push notifications when I get comments.
Mm.
And all of a sudden I get a comment, bing, bing. I'm driving. Bing, 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 bing. And I'm like, the fuck is going on? Like, what is this? Bing. This goes on for the next 20 minutes and I'm thinking, I don't, I'm not really looking at them.
Yeah.
So, but I'm like, God, something's happening. Like I'm getting a lot. Like this is like 2, 3 times as many as I typically get, but I don't really watch it either.
Sure.
At first, I don't drive, so when I am driving, I was like, "Ah, it could be," and then some buddy of mine sends me a text and says, "Yo, bro, you put up a video yesterday of O.J. Simpson. He just died." He's like, "They just announced it like 30 minutes ago," and I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god!" So I call Colby, and Colby's like, "I don't know what." I'm like, "Hey, what happened with it? What's going on?" I explain the situation. He's like, "Listen, this thing just jumped up in the last 30 minutes. It's got like 400 fucking views, and it ends up getting 3 or 4 thousand views over the next few hours." That night, it got over like 200,000 views in the middle of the night. It ended up at it's over 500,000 views right now.
Wow.
Because it did this, it just kept going and going for like the next week. But by that point, other people started doing OJ videos. Now they flooded it. Everybody flooded OJ videos. And so yeah, it's got like 400 over. I mean, I'm sorry, it's got over 500,000 views. I want to say 500. But like I couldn't time that.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that was a fluke. That was luck. So I mean, like so far with the YouTube thing, like I've had, I got an unfair advantage, which I love.
Yeah.
I like the unfair advantage for me.
That's right.
And, and I've got, I've periodically had a few just a fluke,
Hmm.
and of course the other thing is, I have a good work ethic. Like I
Mhm.
like what I'm doing, so it's easy for me to do.
Yeah.
Even though I work a lot, I, I, I'm trying to pull it up right now to see exactly where
Are
this
you
thing is.
using leverage to amplify the results that you got the first time, which is super smart, right? You did the soft white underbelly. I think that was your highest rated one that got
Yes.
millions of
Well,
views.
no, yeah, it may be. Yeah,
Yeah,
it may
I think
be.
it got
That
more
one or
than Lex Friedman, who you did, but you're utilizing those to propel you forward. And my company now, Podcast Cola, I talk to people about this all the time. One of the biggest advantages that single operators, people like you and me, who want to be thought leaders in our space, is podcasting and being able to amplify yourself on podcasts. And what most people don't understand, most people go, okay, man, I'm gonna put out a podcast. It's gonna be great. I got these great ideas, dude. I'm just like Joe Rogan. I'm just like Joe Rogan. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put out a podcast, and everyone's gonna want to listen to it. And so they make the podcast. They put this through you. They put all the effort into making it look slick, and they put it out, and it's
12
crickets,
views.
right?
Right.
Tumbleweed
12,
City,
12, 12 views.
12 views,
Four,
and
14 views.
14 views, right? And they're like, what the fuck? So I learned early on. That's how I got the film deal for my film for the book Billion. How I became king of the Thropo cult. The way I got the book deal was I was like, well, how do you actually get attention to these shows? And there's a few different tactics. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'll send you. I've got a guide for it of exactly how I did it. But the way you do it is by going on other people's shows and borrowing their audience and bringing them to your show. And that's exactly what you've done. That's why you've blown up. When I looked at your show and my publicist was like, hey, you got to get on Matthew's show. He's blowing up. It's because, and when I looked at it, is because you are using the momentum from your fame and from all this great stuff that you've done on other people's shows and bringing that audience over to your own. And that's, at Podcast Cola, that's basically what we do for people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely what I'm doing. Like, I think that's the only way to do it. Oh, by the way, I was wrong. It's got 487,000 views, so not quite 500,000. Whatever. I was
Yeah.
close. It did great. Um, but yeah, that's definitely. I think here's the thing. It's like, and it's still, of course, it's even if you think, oh well, you have an unfair advantage, bro. An unfair advantage. It's still a lot of work. You still have to do the work.
Stop
The
the
problem
work.
is that I'm now doing the work, but at least I'm getting something. And even then, listen, Colby and I were doing 1 or 2 podcasts a week for, I want to say a little over, no, I'm going to say a year, for a year. Then I changed. I went from my old apartment to here, and then I jumped it up to like, I think I usually say like 4, but Colby told me no. He said, we went to 3.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So we went to 3. And then he's like, and then it just, next thing you know, it was like, okay, I can do 3. We did that for like 6 months. And then I started doing 4. And so now it's like 4 a week. and it honestly didn't really hit until about a year and a half ago where it started paying all of our bills,
Yeah.
but that was still 2 years of, and I was getting a check, but I'm not getting enough check to cover anything. Like
Right.
it's an extra 400 bucks, 800 bucks, 300 bucks. Like you get 300 bucks. You bust your ass scheduling things, making thumbnails, having people come here, picking up at the airport, doing all, you're running around doing all this stuff and you get a check and you do that multiple times a week and then you get a check for $200.
Yeah.
That's a slap in the face. But after like I said, after a year and a half to 2 years, and suddenly it's like it starts to happen. And now it's like, okay, this is paying my bills every single month.
Is this what you do full time now? Is the YouTube thing?
I do this. Yeah, I do this and I do keynote speeches. But once again, because of the platform,
Yeah.
people see me and like mortgage brokers and brokerage conventions and
No way.
bankers will see me and they contact me and they're like, "Look, we have a seminar. Would you come and speak at the seminar?" And they're like, "What do you charge?" And I'm like, and I'll tell them how many people are going to be there, and then I'll throw out a number, and I know my number's too low because every time I do it, they're like, "Oh, we're so thrilled to have you." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't charge enough." So, um, so yeah, they'll say, "Yeah, absolutely." We book it. I fly in. Sometimes I'll fly. I like the ones where I fly in the morning, and you an hour, 2 hours later, you do your thing, and then you fly back out that night. But sometimes I have to stay the night because just the way it's arranged.
So how do they justify that? Is it like counter intelligence, kind of like bring in the hacker to talk about cybersecurity kind of stuff?
Kinda I've actually done cybersecurity,
Oh,
ones also, which I didn't understand at all because I was like, I'm not a techie guy, like, I didn't do stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, but you did. You created websites to make people think that you had bank accounts and had money in the bank." They're like, "That is cyber." The other thing they said, "You people think that hacking is where you go in and you break into the software somehow and you write a special code." He goes, "That just doesn't happen." He said, "What hacking typically starts with," he said, "is social engineering." He goes, "Which is what you did," which is exactly what I did.
wow.
I would get convinced so I make a phone call, get a little information, call back, alter my story over and over and over until I found out what I wanted. Then I'd go into Social Security and get them to issue me a Social Security number to a person that doesn't exist. And I only did that because I had to make about 6 phone calls or 8 phone calls to figure out what exactly do I have to say and provide them to get this. So, and I did that a lot, or I talked to somebody before, within 10 minutes, they've told me enough information for me to steal their identity and they have no idea.
So
Um,
crazy.
so what I do is I go in, but I think with the with the banks and financial institutions, it's more of a, hey, this is a slippery slope. Like, here's how it started for me, and here's the point it got to.
Okay.
And I know you think that that it's insane, but I mean, it started with me whiting out a 30-day late. Like, I whited out one thing on one document that's so minor,
Yeah.
and yet the next thing and the reason is that I got emboldened by it. I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that worked. Let me try this." And now this works. And now this works. And before you know it, you think, I'm amazing at this. I'm untouchable. And before you know it, you're doing ridiculous things. And so I explain all that. And I explain how I would get caught and I'd get around it. And this would happen and that would happen. So they do it more of a, hey, look. And then I explain, hey, then I got arrested. I did 13 years in prison. I actually got 26 years. I did 13.
Yeah.
So, I talk about all this, everything that I lost, what it, financially and mentally, what it did to me, what it did to my family, what it did. And I go through the whole thing of like, listen,
Yeah.
it's not worth it. Like, this isn't worth it. Like, you think it is. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. I thought it was pretty fucking cool at the time, but in the end, and I always love those guys who do the whole, well, I wouldn't change anything because it made me the man I am. You're a fucking idiot, bro. I'd change everything. I'd change everything.
The thing. This is the thing with crime that I really like. I'm like, are there some guys that are living? Okay, I watched the Pablo Escobar one. The was it the Narcos? The one with him. Do you ever watch those? That was a really good
Yeah, I
one.
watched
Yeah, I couldn't watch the new
Cristaldo
episodes.
Blanco.
Yeah, the next one, but this
Did you watch?
the Narcos, the first one with Pablo Escobar was really good. I remember watching that and going, "Fuck, man, this guy's making billions of dollars, but like his life is shit. Like he can fucking, he's got the house and the pool and the like all that shit, but he's on the run. And then I look at like the mob guys, right? And I get, living that life and, whatever that story is, right? I'm a Godfather fan. We're all Godfather fans, right? But at the end of the day, you look at like the life that they live by, living the life, it doesn't seem like that good of a life. Like it seems like you got to always look over your shoulder. It doesn't seem like the life of an entrepreneur where you're like, man, like I'm going to go this whole summer on a yacht and travel through Europe and come back and it'll be relaxed and they'll eat great food. It's boring shit, but I'm not really boring, but it's like, it's stable stuff. Their stuff is like, they could get shot at any minute, right? Like the dude's talking about, man, that they're taking me into this room. Michael Francis, he's like, man,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
they call me at 3 a.m. They're like, Vinny's got to, he put me in the car, he blindfolded me. I go into this room, I don't know if my best friend's going to shoot me. I'm like, that is not good. You do not want that. It's great for TV. You don't want that. That is terrible. Like, I don't want to live. There's no amount of money that makes that a good thing. So that's the other part of this whole thing. And there's a great book. God, who wrote it? It's Narconomics, Narcoeconomics, something like that. And it's this guy, and I've talked to him several times. I think I was a little offended that he didn't put me in his book because he talks about the herbal drug phase and he neglected to mention me. But what's interesting is he talks about the drug trade. And he talks about how it's like any other corporation where the guys way at the top are like the CEOs. They get CEO salary. The guys in the middle get middle level management salary. And the guys at the bottom, the dudes that are like actually doing the handoffs of the drugs or whatever they're selling, the crack, the cocaine, the heroin, whatever it is, those guys are earning hour for hour as little as the guy working at McDonald's. And in fact, now in California, it's $21 an hour minimum wage for those. So they're probably, McDonald's probably more lucrative because they figure he calculated how long do you have to wait on the corner? How long do you have to run from the police? How long do you have to look at? And all that stuff. Turns out they're making half of what fast food employees make, but with this incredible amount of risk. So at the end of the day, I guess you're right. I guess there are adrenaline junkies and people who live on that kind of like fuel. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't pay. It doesn't make for a harmonious life, a life that's like really meaningful. But I guess it makes up for some pretty fucking great stories.
Yeah. Well, that's only good if you can monetize it in some way. And our guys with great stories, and they're still working at a gas station.
So let me ask you this: do you think with like now with the internet and like everything, everything that's happened technologically, are there still the same number of guys that are doing like the old school face-to-face cons, like matchstick men type stuff?
Listen, I and it's funny because that happens all the time. But I there was actually one the other day. I think Zach and I did an episode on, my buddy Zach and I did an episode on this probably 6 months ago. And it's just because we read a couple articles and I was like, listen to this. I know exactly what these people were doing. There were two women that were renting an Airbnb for a week.
Mm.
And so they rented an Airbnb. One of them obviously opened up a corporation, or they had someone open a corporation, or they had someone put a DBA in their name, because they get caught very quickly.
Yeah.
They weren't sophisticated, but there's a very easy way to fix everything, the mistakes they made, and they'll go to jail. They'll figure out what those fixes are. They'll come out and they'll do a better job this time. So, and what they did was they rent a place, an Airbnb for a week, and they put it on like Craigslist and for sale at slightly below the value of what they're selling it at. So let's say it's a $350,000 piece of property. They say, hey, we're selling this for $290,000. People show up and they're like, look, we need a deposit. And they'd be like, you can write it to the title company. And they're like, well, you can't write it to me, write it to the title company. And they write it to the title company.
Stop.
And so okay, great. and they give them their information and they say, I'll drop it off at the time. So one of the people says they're the real estate agent, the other one's just a homeowner or
Oh my
whatever.
God.
And so so every day they're collecting. And the fact is if multiple people show up that day, what does it matter?
Holy
It,
shit.
it, it even helps you. Everybody's looking in the
Holy
house. They're
shit.
all like, oh my God, looks like you live there, right? It's fully furnished.
Fuck.
So they end up getting something like 400 in like a week. They get $400,000, and then of course they move. You know, they leave the Airbnb, and people are trying to call them and trying to show up. They're like, one, where's my money? Two, like the appraiser needs to get in. Where are you going to call? You can
Holy
send an
shit.
email to the email address, but they're not answering. You can call their phones, but they're burner phones. They're done. And so these people have the money. So then they start going, oh, where'd that money go? They call the police. They track it, and they go, it all went to this corporation. They try and call the corporation. They can't get in touch. They're like, is this civil? Is it criminal? Well, there was enough people that they said, okay, you know what? It's not civil. We're going to go with criminal on this. And they said, okay. And so they launch an investigation. They track these people down. They end up tracking them down somehow, and they grab them. Like that's an in-person, to me, that's an in-person scam. You had to look at these people. You had to talk them into giving you a deposit. You had to take the deposit, shake their hand. You had to be convincing. So that's a scam. But there's tons of scams, much, like that, where people are meeting in person, shaking your hand,
Yeah.
convincing you to give them money. That happens all the time. It still happens. You have a better chance of success if you're well spoken and you have it set up right. You have a much better chance of success than doing an internet scam.
Dude, I think of myself, look, okay, I'm pretty savvy. I watch true crime stuff. I watch your stuff. I'm like, I fucking would never get scammed. Never get scammed. So, okay,
You'd fall for that though, wouldn't you?
a few years ago. Yeah. That one, maybe not so much, but because I'm a little bit smarter with real estate. I might, but I wouldn't. I mean, I don't give anybody a check until I do the thing. So I'm staying in this apartment that I had in the Marina Del Rey by the water, right? Fancy building, and I need to get a website. This was probably 2006, right? 2007. This is a crazy fucking story. So I'm putting it up on Craigslist. No, sorry, this was like maybe 2008, a little bit later, right? So I put it up on Craigslist. Hey, I need someone to build a website. I thought I'd get someone local. And I get a bunch of people. This one guy's like, hey, yeah, I'd love to come down and meet with you. Here's an example of all the sites I did, whatever. Heavier set gentleman. And so I'm there, shows up in a suit and tie, all this stuff. This is great. Love to build your website. It's going to be $1,000. I just need a deposit, $500. This is where my intuition comes in. My intuition was like, I like this guy. He's saying all the right stuff. He's like, he knows all the things about the website thing. So I'm like, okay, it feels good. So, but I was like, something about me was like, when I went to sign the deposit check, I was like, I'm not going to like actually sign it. So I just like put a line and I gave him the deposit check. He went off, he cashed the check, right? I think he must have signed it himself, cashed the check, and then the number disconnected, right? So I realized that this guy was, this was his whole shtick. He figured out how to be a website designer. He would answer ads. He would show up with a nice suit. He had a nice car, right? Okay, forget about this guy now. Fast forward to just before COVID. I go to Home Depot, all right, with my kid. And a lot of the stuff I think is like personal. Maybe I was greedy. I think about that, right? And this guy comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, man, my kid's in the car." He points to the car and he's like, I just gotta get some money for food, and I got this gift card. Right? Do you know where this is going? So this guy
Yeah.
has a fucking Home Depot card, right? He's like, it's got $500 on it. I just want $400 for it. It was my wife gave it to me as a present, but like, I got to get food for the family. I'm embarrassed. And I was like, yeah, but that's just a fucking piece of plastic. I'm like, he's like, nope, no problem. Let's go in, and he had it written with a marker on the gift card. He's like, it said like $523.22. It was real legit. So he goes, let's just go in and you can check the card. And if it's good, you can just pay me for it. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. He's like, look, just give me $100. At this stage, I'm like, man, it's $100 for a $500 card. I'm helping this guy out. That's his kid in the car. It's like, this is going to be great. And then, I'm going to get, $400 worth of extra stuff. Everybody wins in this scenario. So we walk up to the register. He hands the lady the card, right? The lady runs it through. I go, how much is on the card? She goes, yep, it's what's on there, $523.13. He's like, cool. Let's go to the car and, get the $100. I get, get the $100. I give him the $100. He hands me the card. I look at it. It's got the same 523, whatever. I go and I do my shopping, get to the register, and the lady's like, sir, there's no money on this card. And I'm like, holy fucking shit. This fucking guy, so quick that, with his hand, sleight of hand,
Yeah.
swapped the blank for the one with the money in it. If I was smart, I should have taken a picture and I could have gotten it online. Go back to the parking lot because I was like, oh, that was his kid in the car. And some lady with like 4 kids is getting into the car with that kid. It wasn't even his car or his kid. Then I go, something is weird here, weirder than what I thought. And I think back, I'd seen that guy before. He was the fucking dude that cashed my check for the website.
When you first started the story and you said you were at Home Depot, I thought you were going to say you ran into that guy.
Yeah.
But then you started on this other one.
It was him.
Same. Why you didn't recognize him?
I didn't, he was dressed in like sweats and stuff, but I played it back into my head and I was like, holy fucking shit. He was going to get that. It was like a cosmic fucking thing where he was going to get that fucking $400 for me. And I had that put on my board in my office and I told everybody the story and I was like, you know what, I lost, whatever it was, the $100 or whatever. But that's the story that I have. But this reminds me that anybody can fucking get scammed, no matter how fucking smart you are. And I was like,
So I sell paintings on Etsy, right?
yeah,
So I had this woman who contacted me. Well, it was probably a Nigerian, in probably a male Nigerian in Nigeria. But anyway, so she sends me a text and she's like, "Hey, how much is this painting? I don't want to go through the website, but I love the painting." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she says, "Can I send you $1,000?" Sure, no problem. She said, "I'll send you a cashier's check." I said, "No problem." Sends me a cashier's check. The cashier's check, it was getting delivered like that day or the next day. He said, I messed up and I paid, I ended up getting it for 1,400, or my husband or somebody got it for 1,400, but 400 was supposed to go to my cousin. Can you do me a favor? You're going to get the check, the cashier's check tomorrow. And I did. I get it. And it sure looked perfect, looked great. And she said, can you cash it and send $400, cash out $400 to my cousin? And I was like, yeah, as soon as I get the check. Well, I get the check. And of course she's saying, hey, have you got the check yet? I said, no, I haven't gotten the check yet. And so I drag it out for like a week until the point where she's saying to me, like, what's going on? What kind of games are you playing?
oh yeah,
I was like, come on, you didn't think I was going to fall for this, did you? Like, it's a scam. Like, I mean, the check it's fake. I'll deposit it. They'll give me, because I've had my bank account for so long, they're going to immediately say the 1,400 is good. I'm going to send you the $400. And then 3 days later, or a week later, they're going to say, hey, this isn't a real check.
yeah.
And they're going to take 1,400 from me. And I lost $400. Like, but yeah, people are out there actively doing it. But I do think going up to someone in person and looking them in the face gives you a better chance of getting money out of them, unless it's a small scam.
Yeah.
There's people that do it for $25.
And again, it feels to me all the time like I would never even consider doing something like that. But like it seems to me like the current governmental situation is they don't give a fuck. Like I went to Home Depot and I was like, I talked to the manager. I said, hey buddy, I just got scammed in your store. This is what the guy looks like. Can you pull up the camera footage? And you know what they said? Ooh, civil matter, civil. I was like, what? I was like, he was using a Home Depot card. Your girl told me that card had that money on it. Just, give the footage, call the police. He was like, yeah, I don't know. But I think these
Yeah.
guys know that. They know that. They know that, like, it takes a lot of balls for them to do that. Like, it takes a lot of balls. But then again, this guy, I guess what could he go to jail for like $100 scam like that?
No, I mean, he could in Florida, not in California, or New York. But listen, there are scammers, and literally when they talk to them in New York, they're like, they'll tell them, that I come up here and I run scams, and then I go back to Florida and I spend the money. And they're like, why don't you run the scams in Florida? And they'll tell them, oh, no, you'll go to jail in Florida. They'll throw you in jail for anything in Florida.
Oh
You don't want
man.
to, you don't want to fuck around. You know, and you've seen our sheriffs, right? You've seen the videos of the sheriffs that come out.
Yeah.
They're talking about just gunning people. Like they, you know, they're not playing around, bro. Like
Wow.
they're not playing around. And listen, when I get pulled over, I'm very respectful.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. No, sir. Absolutely. Thank you for stopping me for speeding. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so embarrassed. You know, I mean, thank God you're here. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think there's definitely still scams going on. There's all kinds of scams going on. They're a constant. It's a constant evolution.
Wow.
So, you know, I'll never go hungry, but I don't have to worry about that. I don't, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
Worst, listen, every time something happens and my wife will be like, yeah, I don't know, you know, wow, is it that much? Or what? I'm like, listen, I'm like, worst case that happens, there's always fraud. And she's like, no, no. I'm like, listen, I'm just saying we're gonna be okay. She's no, stop.
Yeah, but it's just I'm telling you, man, it's just the shift. It's like, it's that little microsecond between winning the marathon and losing the marathon that like you just shift that, and you have shifted that. You've shifted that into public speaking where you get, tens of thousands of dollars for giving a
Well,
talk, right? Or
listen, I'm going to Vegas to talk to a guy, a white collar guy
yeah.
who just got sentenced to like 3 or 4 years in prison. And I'm flying in to spend about an hour with him to let him know what to expect when he gets there.
Shit.
That's
Wow.
it. They're flying me in, putting me in a hotel, paying me. Like that's the
Wow.
thing. Like it's so cool. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, yeah. I'm making it trying to turn it around, make it work for me for a change.
I think you're doing a great job, man. I think you're doing a great job. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from your experience. And while, yeah, you didn't do the greatest stuff in the world, you paid your debt and you're out now and you're telling the story and you're doing good stuff. So I think that's all that matters, man.
Do you have any social media that you want me to or
Yeah.
any links?
Yeah. So great.
So
So if people want to
apparently you've got a book. There's a book.
Yeah. So
Where's
if
the
if
book?
if people want to check out the book, it is Billion: How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult. Check that out. Anybody wants to reach out to me, I do this on every show. People think I'm nuts. I've been on shows with millions of viewers. My direct email I will give people is darkzess@gmail.com. That's DARKZESS@gmail.com. Anybody that's interested in getting involved in Amazon Mastery, the course that I teach on Amazon, I'll do that for all listeners of Matthew's show for free. So you don't have to do crime. I'll give you the course for free. It's a 1 hour course, teaches you everything you need to know about Amazon. Reach out to me, email. We'll include the link below. I'm sure Matthew will include the link below. It's darkzess@gmail.com, DARKZESS@gmail.com. Make sure you mention Matthew's show so I know you heard it on here. If you like this podcast or are interested in being on other podcasts, check out our agency, Podcast Cola. We are the largest podcast booking agency in the country, and we get people just like you booked on these and other great shows. And yeah, in a nutshell, and the book Billion: How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult will become a movie soon. But if you want to check out the audiobook, please do so. Check out the book or the audiobook on Audible or Amazon.
All right, hold on one second. Give me 1 second. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, if you like the video, please share it. Please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the bell. Also, leave me a comment. We're going to leave all of the links in the description box, so you can go straight to Amazon and buy the book, and go to the website and all the other stuff. So I really appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. Please please consider joining my Patreon. See ya.